Welcome to Relentless Red Storm, where debate becomes energy, energy becomes culture, and every fan has a voice. I'm Jason Safford alongside my partner in the storm, Darrell Jazz Johnson, and tonight we're not starting with the game. We're starting with the decision. Because what that bracket dropped, St. John's 28-6, Big East regular season champion, Big East tournament champion, was handed a 5 seed in the East. And the question hit immediately across New York: what are we looking at here? Is this evaluation or is this disrespect? Darrell, 5 seed controversy, the committee versus reality. Lay it out clean. We got a 28-6 record, 19-1 in the Big East since January. Dominant win over UConn in the title game. One of the most complete two-way teams in the country, and the result, a 5 seed. That's not just a number, that's a statement.
Only a 5 seed, but in a bracket with Duke as a number one, UConn as a number two, Kansas as a number four, it appears to be the toughest bracket in out of the four brackets. So um I think there is definitely disrespect for the Big East. I will say this, the Big East didn't do themselves any favors in last year's tournament, as St. John's, Marquette, and UConn all went out relatively early. A Big East team did not get to the second weekend, the round of 16 in the NCAA tournament a year ago. Um, and Georgetown coach has repeatedly said, for this league to be what it is, I have to get this program better. So he takes some responsibility for that. That being said, this is a conference um, that has won two of the last three NCAA championships. That, of course, being UConn Huskies, led by Dan Hurley. Um, so it's you know, Dan Hurley, and this was a question I actually asked about what Shaheen Holloway said when he was making a case for his team, which obviously did not get in. He said the Big East is disrespected. He doesn't know why. Um, then Hurley said if Seton Hall was in the tournament, they would definitely win a game. We obviously won't get a chance to see that. Um, I don't know why the Big East is not rated as high as I believe they should be rated. I do believe that Seton Hall is worthy of being an NCAA team, but and I know there's technically no correlation between the AP poll, uh, the ESPN poll, and the selection committee. But St. John's was ranked number 10 in the country on the most recent poll that came out on Monday, and to receive a 5 seed seemed a bit strange. Now, I don't know if this is coach speak and him wanting to keep his team finished or focus on the game, or if he really felt that way. But Pitino said, when asked on Sunday, um, he didn't expect a 3 or 4 seed. Um, he thought five, possibly a four, but he thought the 5 seed is what they were going to receive. And again, I don't know if that's coach speak. I don't know if that's what he really thought. But bottom line is, what's the point in complaining about your seed? You got to beat who you beat. Um, not like they're going to go back and change the seeding. So there would be no point. So maybe Patino felt a different way, but he said what he said, what would be best for the team. Yeah, I just want to go into um what Patino, what Hurley said on Friday after they won and before they lost to St. John's. Every team in our league is basically a top 100 team efficiency wise. There's a lot of manipulation that goes on with, and they have so many games that are so close to being a quad one, quad two. We had programs just miss that net threshold of top 75 where they could easily have 3 or 4 quad one wins if we didn't have some underperformances in the non-conference that became landmines for them. And this is talking about Seton Hall. I mean, their non-conference schedule was absolutely NCAA caliber. Then they got to the semifinals of the Big East tournament and 20 plus wins. If they're in the NCAA tournament, they will win a game. So hell yeah, Seton Hall has the quality of an NCAA team. I agree, but it doesn't matter if I agree or not because I am not on the selection committee. Um, Bottom line is, I feel the Big East is disrespected. Um, Obviously, coaches in the Big East feel the Big East is disrespected. Bottom line is, they perform well in a tournament that can help change that. And by they, um, because to me, you're in the conference, you're at war, but once you hit the tournament, in theory, you should be rooting for every team in the conference. It helps the conference overall. So we should be rooting for that fourth UConn St. John's matchup of the season uh, that will take place in the round of 8. We should be rooting for Villanova to get as far as they can because that helps the overall conference.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, going back to Pitino and his expectations for a 5 seed, as well as being parked in the East with Duke, UConn, Michigan State, Kansas, Louisville. The East is just jam packed with teams that all have, history, legacy, and potential. And, Michigan State was in the top 10, for most of the season, between the top 10 and top 15. Tom Izzo is always, a very, very highly respected competitive coach. Bill Self at Kansas. And that's one of the challenges with the Big East is that outside of Hurley, Patino's now come in. A lot of their coaches aren't necessarily as well regarded, even though they have, great, uh, records and professionalism. Overall, I'm a huge fan of Ed Cooley at Georgetown. I think that he's going to, do a great job with that program. He just has the muster, in my opinion. He just has to get the players, and he can do some great things there. Shaka Smart at Marquette. They had a rough year this year, but they've got some great players. Nigel James, had a fantastic season. And again, with the NIL, the ability to attract players to you, Shaheen Holloway did something amazing with, kids that literally were, completely under the radar. And now he's bringing Seton Hall up and becoming a magnet for that school. I want to sort of segue that with Patino talking about uh, you know the seed and sort of how he looks at it, because Patino is your true ambassador of the game now. He's a Hall of Fame coach. At 73, he's brought back to back, conference and tournament championships to the Big East, and for St. John's. First time in not only school history but in conference history that one team has won both regular season and tournament back to back without anything being shared. And
Right, yeah.
for a guy like Patino to come in, having built programs at Kentucky, and Louisville, having NBA experience, and now choosing to continue his legacy at St. John's. Pitino has no problem with this 5 seed because he actually thrives in this discomfort. He thrives in this tension where they've kind of been smirked at. I don't want to say they're besmirched because again, I think part of it is that he recognized the selection process has changed and the
Hmm.
and the tournament isn't as heavily weighted as it used to be. But that being said, the other thing that I think Pitino looks at in terms of getting the 5 seed is that, yes, historically, the 5-12 matchup is the most likely upset opportunity. But St. John's isn't the regular 5 seed. And the truth is that they're going up against a tough Northern Iowa team that when I researched this, by the way, Darrell, I was blown away. They have the number one defense in the country at 61.3 points per game. Now, that being said, who did Northern Iowa play that, they were really that challenged, that impresses me. And I think that's one of the things in looking at this game is that Northern Iowa is going to be an absolutely discipline focused possession by possession ball security team. And in many ways, they are absolutely just another version of Seton Hall. To your point of Dan Hurley even saying Seton Hall would win a game. And if Seton Hall were playing St. John's in the tournament, it would be a different thing. But it's Northern Iowa. And the level of competition that Northern Iowa played throughout the season is something that you now have to look at compared to what Seton Hall played during the season and say, okay, well, they got in and they're playing St. John's, but the outcome of this game is going to make you think twice about that part of the seeding in terms of, why did this team get in over a team like Seton Hall that, yeah, they don't have the prettiest record, but man, we saw their games. These guys played heart on sleeve for 40 minutes nonstop. And they brought it back so many times against great competition. St. John's and UConn being, two of the tops that they played, but they played a lot of teams that absolutely they took it to the, ultimate end. And they didn't get the results all the time that they wanted, but they still wound up with a 21-11 record, I think, something to that effect, and had a terrific season overall. And I think that's one of the things about this seeding is that some teams like St. John's got lower seeds than they probably should have. I mean, they wound up ranked 10th in the country at the end of the season after the tournament, but again, we know about the big quad three loss, that Providence became. However, they only lost one game since then. I mean, 19-1 since January 3rd.
And that's personally, I think that's one of the problems in how the selection committee views things because yes, in theory you could say every game is equal. In actuality, that is not the case. Um, a conference tournament game can't be a conference tournament championship game can't be equated the same as, DePaul at Carnesecca Arena.
Yeah.
It can't. Um, a semifinal game against Seton Hall that's fighting for its tournament life cannot be viewed as the game a week before. Even though it was against Seton Hall, but it was at the Rack, um, the Rock rather. Um, so I get it from a numbers and logistic standpoint. Um, they don't value any one game over the other. They should. And they put a lot of value on the preseason schedule, the pre-conference schedule. But what you're seeing is teams in bad conferences being rewarded. For example, Texas did win their game yesterday, but Texas had a horrible season. If you look at it, they were eighth in their conference, 500 in their conference. But they get the benefit of playing in the SEC, which I don't believe should happen, but that's the way it is. Unfortunately, um, for the Big East, here it is. Um, Texas was 18 and 14, 9 and 9 in the SEC. Excuse me, I said they finished in eighth place. They finished in 10th place. They finished in 10th place, 500 in their conference, 18 and 14. They played yesterday and won. So they will play tomorrow. But that's a bubble team to me that should have been out. Um Seton Hall wasn't even regarded as one of the first four teams out. So it's unfortunate. I think again it uh shows that there is a disrespect of the Big East Conference, but the only way you earn that respect is by beating up on the teams that you do play. Um, Seton Hall, one of the things I looked at when I saw Northern Iowa, um, they don't have great rebounders on that team. Um, their leading rebounder is a senior, Tristan Smith. Um, he's 6'6". So they have height, but that height is young and doesn't really play. Second leading rebounder, Leon Bond, the third, 4.8 rebounds. He's 6'5". Um, so this is a game that St. John's can and should dominate inside and on the boards. And if they are able to do that on Friday, they will be headed to the second round of the NCAA tournament to play a tough Kansas team. And though, when asked a direct question about the game, Pitino declined, which he's a pro's pro. Why would he give Northern Iowa the bulletin board material of him scouting Kansas before they play Northern Iowa? But he did say, because and we didn't mention this, the game is in San Diego. I mean,
Yeah.
how many Red Storm fans have the ability to fly to the West Coast to catch that game on Friday? He said that if they do beat Northern Iowa on Friday, that it will be a very tough environment playing against Kansas in San Diego because there's going to be a bunch of Kansas fans there. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, at the very least, a couple of hundred St. John's fans can get to the game. Certainly, they have to be some St. John's alum on the West Coast, so close to the West Coast. Um, so hopefully they can get there and cheer the boys on. But it's a pretty tough challenge. It will be a very tough challenge for St. John's to get to the round of 16, but I believe they are capable.
Absolutely. Look, the reality is that first of all, Kansas has to make it past their first round, and Kansas didn't have nearly the season that St. John's had. they've got internal struggles with their star player. And, truthfully, they're a shaky team at best. They've had some great wins this season, but they've also had some tremendously bad losses. And, who knows what team shows up on Friday night for them versus St. John's. You know, Here's the funny thing about this. We've actually seen it all season long. This team plays best when they feel overlooked, when they feel doubted, and when they feel like they have to take something. After the Providence loss, they went into Butler and Creighton and Xavier and absolutely destroyed these teams. And when I say destroyed them, I'm not talking about the way they destroyed UConn, destroyed them in that they went into second half deficits and came back and showed the resolve, the resilience to overcome the deficits that each one of these teams presented them. And they only got better with each game in terms of their ability to become cohesive and understand their roles and assignments. And we've seen it all season with St. John's. They, struggled early on, although they played some great games. They nearly beat Alabama. They, nearly, really, should have beaten Iowa State. And although they, struggled against Auburn in the second half, as Pitino said, they thought they were playing Houston, and so they just didn't prepare for Auburn, and they felt like that was a mistake with the committee and the confusion with them being able to prepare properly. Now, Pitino said it in the press conference, I believe, after the seeding tournament that the reality is they're going to have plenty of time to prepare for Northern Iowa, but they're not going to have that much time to prepare for whoever they play on Sunday. And that's the challenge of the tournament, is that you get a week to prepare for the next round, but the following round you only get a day, and that's where the challenge really lies. So looking at Northern Iowa and where they stand, again, I said they're very much like a Seton Hall. They want to grind it out. Their scoring defense is number one in the country at 61.3 points per game allowed. They've got elite 3-point defense. They allow 28.5%. They're a slow tempo, half court control team. Notice the word slow. One of the things that's not talked about in these numbers that's very easy for me to read is that this is not a team that can run. And St. John's is a team that can run. Not only that, but Northern Iowa's tallest player, to your point, was 6'6", whereas you've got a front court of St. John's that's 6'8", 6'9", 6'7", and coming off the bench, Reuben Prey at 6'11". So you've got absolute dominance from a Big East basketball powerhouse going up against a team in the middle of God knows where. I'm not going to say nowhere, but I have no idea where this Northern Iowa team is in Iowa. And the truth is, I don't know who they played, but what I can tell you is they've had to play very slow to control the game. And against a St. John's team that is all about pressure, this is going to be hard for Northern Iowa to deal with. And the other factor that really has to be considered here is that how St. John's played their last 3 games is how Rick Pitino is going to be preparing them for every game in this tournament, which is to come out with literally a knockout punch. St. John's in the Big East tournament started the tournament 27-0 in all 3 games, which when you stop and really think about that, just that alone, scoring 27 points unanswered before their opponents had a chance to score anything, they were wire-to-wire dominators in all 3 contests in the postseason where it's win or go home. So they've got that mindset going into this game. that it's literally, hey, we've got to strike first and hit these guys hard. They're never going to know what's hidden.
Absolutely. And I'm going to use some uh, Shaquille O'Neal slang. On Friday, when St. John's plays Northern Iowa, it should be a barbecue chicken alert. Zuby in the post. Zuby in the post. Dylan Mitchell in the post. Bryce Hopkins in the post. Barbecue chicken alert. Crash the boards. They're a bigger team. They're the more athletic team. Um, they should dominate this team from a physicality standpoint. They should dominate this team rebounding the ball. They should uh, uh, feed the ball in the post and dominate that way. They should run every chance that they get because Northern Iowa wants to slow the pace down. Bottom line. And one of the good things, and Pitino said this, and it's very true. In the NCAA tournament, you cannot control who you play. You can control how you come out and how you are playing. And St. John's has looked excellent. They looked excellent in the Big East tournament. Led for over 116 minutes of the tournament. So they only, 116 minutes out of 120. So that they were remarkable in the Big East tournament. They jumped on every team that they played. Uh, they jumped on Providence in the final game, coached by Kim English for the Providence Friars. They jumped on Seton Hall in a tough matchup, having to face the same team on consecutive Fridays, and they jumped on UConn. So if they jump on this Northern Iowa team and dominate with their size and physicality, they should win. Barbecue chicken alert.
I love it. Barbecue chicken alert. Get plenty of sauce. So, I know part of the, challenge with the tournament is looking ahead can be dangerous, but at the same time, you have to plan out your whole bracket and, have it ready. I think one of the things for St. John's fans is the challenge that St. John's faces is that they go from tough game to tough game. But again, as I said, Rick Pitino actually thrives in this environment. So, you start with a Northern Iowa team that's very much like a Seton Hall team. Then you go on to a potential matchup with Kansas. Now, if Kansas loses, it's a completely different discussion, but still a challenge. Whoever they play on Sunday, should they win. Looking at that, and let's say that it is Kansas. Obviously, Kansas has Darren Peterson, 19.8 points per game, elite shot creator. They've got a big defensive presence in the middle in Flory Bidunga, who's a rim protector. And it's Kansas. I mean, you couldn't get a more historic legacy program. And the best part of it, Zuby Ejiofor started there. So how fitting is it that here Zuby Ejiofor just won all the awards in the biggest conference. He gets snubbed, by the way, in All America for the NCAAs, which I thought was a big, snub, considering just how dominating his uh, victory was, with the Big East Player of the Year, getting the Defensive Player of the Year, the Scholar Athlete of the Year, and the first team Big East consensus vote. Um, so I mean, what a sweet sort of you know culmination of Zuby Ejiofor's career to really rise to the top of the Big East and become this absolute dominating presence, and now has the possibility to return to his roots at Kansas and go up against Bill Self and his team, knowing that he's got Rick Pitino in his corner and a great group of guys around him that are all playing together. And I think that's one of the exciting things about, even though they got snubbed in several different ways with the seeding, you've got a great matchup there. And then should they win that one, now you go on to the Sweet 16, and most likely, all expectations being what they are, you face Duke. Now, if you want to win the tournament, you're going to have to go through Duke anyway, most likely, because they're number one in the nation, and that's what everybody's predicting. So, what better, more fitting opportunity? And I'm speaking from the standpoint of Pitino, the architect, to have the Sweet 16 going up against the ultimate powerhouse. And if you get by them, it's almost all downhill, because then you face who else but potentially UConn. So literally by the time you get to the Final Four, man, you've literally gone through the gauntlet of teams where it's almost like you're laughing when you get to the Final Four if you make it there.
Absolutely. And looking at the 10 losses that Kansas had, 6 were against ranked teams. 4 were against unranked teams. So obviously, and you mentioned this earlier, excuse me, um, they have the ability to have a bad game. Um, for the St. John's faithful, let's hope that bad game happens either Friday or Sunday or both.
That's
Ugly
right.
win on Friday, loss on Sunday.
Yeah. All right. So my question for you, looking at this matchup from the bigger picture, have you picked your bracket yet?
No, I'm not sure if I will.
Okay.
Um, I like to do a lot of research when I'm picking a bracket, but sometimes, 20 years ago, I would buy every area paper because they have huge sports sections on the first day of the tournament and give you breakdowns of everybody. But now I can do that online if I choose to. I don't think I'm going to choose to do that. You know, as we close on 14 hours or so before the tournament begins. I'm just gonna watch and enjoy.
So bringing it full circle, the committee gave St. John's a 5 seed. And Darrell, when you look at it from the bigger picture, what they really gave them was a stage. And the anticipation for this Friday night matchup, if this team is what we think it is, the 5 seed won't define them. It will expose everyone who got it wrong.
Absolutely. Um, and again, I think that's why Patino, he could have truly felt that they were going to get the 5 seed, but it serves no purpose. Everybody else can complain. It serves no purpose for Rick Pitino to complain about the seed. Go out there and win. That's what they would have had to do if they were a 3 seed, a 4 seed, or what they actually are, a 5 seed. Go out there and win. And that's how you shut up the naysayers. That's how you potentially, uh, uh, with the success of not only St. John's, but UConn and Villanova, that's how you get a bubble team like Seton Hall, or maybe it's Georgetown next year, or Rick's son, Richard and Xavier. That's how you get a biggest team on the bubble into the tournament, as opposed to a Texas team that was in 10th place in their conference with a 500 record.
This is March. It's all about winning. Nothing is given. Everything is taken. So whether you're in the Garden, Queens, or anywhere in Red Storm Nation, stay locked in, stay loud, and stay relentless. We'll see you on Friday night.